Recording's on.
Chair Ford, if you could please do an intro and do a summary of what we have for the record, for the recording record.
Summary of what record? Of what we've done? Was it not recording?
Yeah, it was not recording. So you can do a summary of the date
Okay.
and what we're doing, and that way the recording will be up to date.
Perfect. We opened the meeting at 7:07. We're currently starting on our agenda item, which is the reopening plan. Mr. Utterback has provided us with a summary on the 3 sections we will hear, and we will pause in between each section for the board to ask questions.
It is still not going to allow me. Is that better? Let's see. Nope. Okay, we're just going to move along. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Chair and directors, immediately in the second week of March, when it became apparent that life was not progressing as typical, with the closure of the schools for COVID, North Clackamas adopted some charges that were related to the COVID-19 planning to sit centered in our conversations. Chief among them was low transmission rates for the COVID-19 virus transmission in the community. We prioritized maintaining low rates and trying to contribute to low rates in the school district in the area. Our next guiding principle has been coordinated actions that underscore the safety and care for all people, and to provide reassurance for students, staff, and parents. Put bluntly, as Matt said earlier, we centered care in our conversations, and this is one of our core values in the school district. Our final guiding thought was to stand ready with multiple educational delivery models that are responsive to the current health and community needs. We knew that we needed models, and we are working on models that are able to be responsive to whatever the current health and community needs are. In recent weeks, and in June in particular, we became focused on responding to and engaging with the state of Oregon's guidance. As a public school district in the state of Oregon, we work with the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority. We have taken both of the documents that are referenced here on the slide, the Ready Schools, Safe Learners, and the Comprehensive Distance Learning documents. We've torn into them. You have a team of about 14 folks who are meeting very regularly, in some cases daily and twice daily, working through pieces of these documents. It's important for you to know, and I'm just going to call this out so that anytime you look at one of these 2 documents, be sure to go back to the Oregon Department of Ed's website and take the most recent. They're being updated frequently with changing information. So if you have downloaded one, anytime you refer, go back to the ODE website for sure. You can advance, Cindy. The first document, the Ready School Safe Learners, talks to an operational blueprint for reentry. So for the reopening of school in 2020-2021, each school district and actually at the school level will be responsible for developing and submitting operational blueprints. You'll notice that some of those are shaded with a white background and some with a blue background. Those in the white background are required responses. There are some parameters in the blueprint requirements that require work with your local public health authority. For us, that's Clackamas County. And we are doing so. We're working on those pieces. You'll notice as we proceed through this presentation that these 8 pieces for the blueprint come alive in the work groups and in the subject matter experts that we've brought together to try to put together the best blueprint possible. Cindy? The timeline for us, so you know where we're headed. This is all guided by the state of Oregon, ultimately with plans being submitted on August 15th. So leading up to that, we're in a feedback loop right now, looking at thought exchange and a survey for parents. With the thought exchange out in the field that's broad-based, staff as well as parents. We've looked at youth truth. You'll see some of those themes here in a little bit that have emerged up to now. We will go back to work looking at those pieces of feedback, rework the plan, and we expect the week of August 3rd to share a revised proposed plan with the community. And then the week of August 10th, once that is fairly solid, sending that on to Clackamas County Public Health. At this point, we have a board meeting scheduled on the 13th of August with you all to look at that final plan, though we know that there's going to be need for us to be in communication with you prior to August 13th. And then by August 15th, we need to submit plans to the Oregon Department of Education. For reference, the first days of the published school calendar currently that you've adopted are September 8 and 9. That's what I have in terms of guidance and planning timelines. From here, I'm available for questions, and then we'll move into the next section. Also available for questions at the end if you want to hear the totality and then.
Or do you have any questions?
I have a quick question for Director Sharman. So the September 8th through 9th, the first day of school, that is what our board has adopted for the next calendar year. And can that be revised just depending on, you know, where the conversation goes with the state and our planning?
Yes, absolutely. The board retains the authority on establishing the school calendar specific to students and student days generally. And, you know, I expect guidance to continually be revised. That particular calendar was built around instructional hours, requirements that were known at that time. And good question. Yes.
Thank you.
Question. Anybody else?
I do, Libra. This is Director Bauer. Remind me when teachers are to return to work?
A full week before that. I don't have a calendar open right now. Typically, the first day of school would be on a Tuesday, and teachers typically return the week before on Monday.
August 31st.
Is that the date?
So roughly that's their training period for these new models. Okay, thank you.
Actually, I just want to be clear, that's the current calendar developed prior to the knowledge of these models.
Okay, thank you.
Any other directors? I cannot see everyone, so you need to.
Yeah, Director Schradel.
Director Schradel.
This is a compounded question, probably with a follow-up, but so having gone through COVID crisis for a new school year before my life. So as it relates to education, is this something that requires board action to adopt before it goes to ODE? Or is this a, I don't understand. So that's the first question.
Sure. Right now, the guidance does not indicate board adoption. It indicates more a board awareness. I have a sense that there'll be components within this that will necessitate board action. The plan might be including modifying the calendar. The plan might be that we will not meet the instructional hours requirements, so we need your authority to say, we're not going to meet instructional hours. So it's a little bit, because we don't know what components we might need some grace, I guess, from the Oregon Department of Ed. We don't know yet what we might need your adoption of. And I do think that typically we proceed very close together in large decisions, and it would be beneficial for all of us to know that board and leadership are seeing this topic somewhat similarly. So if there's a board adoption of some feature, we may ask for that.
And and this will, additional questions or more in-depth questions will come later, but it's kind of like via policy, this is a substantial change of the education delivery model, and we don't really cover it in policy. So I can understand, I'm happy we're having a board meeting on the 13th before the 15th, so we can actually have further discussions about that. But it is also, I guess I, as one board member, just hope we could have more meetings, because if we do end up with this, that, or the other thing, and I'll use the other thing as online, teachers need as much time to prepare for rigorous online, if that's the path this goes. So, and thank you. Thank you for all the staff who do this, because it's 57 pages, and I know it's over 50 people that have been diving into this. So thank you for your summer.
Director Schrader, and just so everyone knows, the chairs have been in discussion with the superintendent about further discussions, so we will make sure that we are all in the know before the 13th, and we'll make sure that, of course, is a public session. But in addition to that, I think it's important that in your question, Director Schrader, we're going to have to support this publicly in some official way. And so I think there will be a need for us to adopt things, because this cannot just lean on our staff, meaning the superintendent. We have to take full responsibility for knowing what this is, understanding it, and supporting it completely. So we've been in those discussions, and we'll keep you guys informed, but we're on top of that stuff. This is just the beginning. Other directors, I can't see you again, so you need to kind of shout out, and then I'll recognize you. Seeing none, we will move on to the next section. Are we ready for that next section?
We are. Good evening. I am going to walk us through the feedback that has been driving our work and provide additional information that we have to date on the instructional delivery models that we're looking at. Currently, our instructional executive directors have taken a deep dive into student, parent, and staff feedback from multiple sources, and this is informing our work on the delivery and the instructional model design. We have collected feedback and organized them into themes from sources such as Youth Truth survey data, family empathy interviews, which intentionally collected information from our historically underrepresented and bilingual families, in addition to others. We've collected data from our thought exchange feedback that has gone out. We've had to date a couple of work sessions, which have included our employee association groups. And we are beginning work groups with representatives from a variety of stakeholders as well. Here you see quotes that represent examples of what our students, our staff, and our parents are telling us. Quote 1 from Student Voice: "We need letter grades, electives, and social interaction with friends." Another student told us, "I feel like some teachers were a lot more understanding with my life outside of school while we had an online learning, which I appreciated." We had a staff member tell us, "It is unsafe to return people to schools. Cases are rising." And one of our parents told us, "We need live teacher-student interaction and provided materials, too much computer time." And if you can move to the next slide. We continue to see consistent themes that are surfacing from our students and families and from our staff who are sharing what matter to them. Some of the information that we're getting, such as it talks about the motivation and learning of students. And so that motivation and learning of our students is highly connected to consistency of instructional structures, the pace at which we're delivering that, organization of our teachers, high expectations, and the frequency of communication that are coming from our teachers and our district staff. So these are just a few examples to give you a little bit of a taste of what type of feedback that we're looking at and that what we're getting. In addition to that data that is surfacing from these different sources, at this time, our Teacher Association has shared with us that nearly half of our teachers, 49.5%, shared in a recent survey that they themselves are at risk or have a family member in which they live with who is also at risk or could be at risk on their own. We, in this survey, 31 of our teachers indicated that they are considering leaving the profession, retiring, or taking a leave of absence if we hold in-person courses at this time. And to date, 20% of our families are currently requesting at this time an online education option until our public health exposure is under control. So this gives you a little, you know, a to what people have anxiety around and what they're worried about. If you can move to the next slide. So these themes, along with additional feedback and the Oregon Department of Education guidance, has led us to planning for the following education delivery models, which I will go through a little bit more in detail. The three models we're currently planning for are a comprehensive distance learning model, and I'll talk about that in a minute, a hybrid model, which also includes a short-term distance learning model. And I do want to point out for staff involved in planning, this is an additional model that we need to plan for behind the scenes. But for our families, it'll show integrated into the hybrid model. So a hybrid model in which we can move to a short-term model fairly quickly if need be, and I'll talk about that as well. And last but not least, a full online virtual program model that we're looking at. So while we are still working through many of the details of these three models, I will share with you what we know to date. I'll start with a comprehensive learning model, which would allow for all students, access to instruction and learning remotely. Generally, it is meant for a period of time of 4 weeks or greater, which I think is an important distinction, as you'll hear, you know, short-term distance learning versus comprehensive distance learning. So all students in a period of time of 4 weeks or greater. All students would be given a district laptop, and we've heard loud and clear that we need to have some video interaction. And so we are putting measures in place for video interaction and just experiential interaction with peers and our teachers. However, this model does limit the in-person supports that would happen. Go ahead and you can move to the next one. Next, moving into the hybrid model, it consists of students being present with in-person learning for 2 days a week and 2 days a week off-site, with 1 flex day in the week for additional supports, teacher planning, office hours, etc. In this model, students would be cohorted into 2 groups, which would allow us to meet the physical distancing guideline. So for further understanding, this would mean that students within a school would be split into Group A, Group B. Group A would go to school for the 2 consecutive days and be off-site, wherever that is, for the other 2 days. And then Group B would go to school for 2 consecutive days, and those cohorts would stay the same. In addition to that, we would make every effort to cohort siblings and families on the same consecutive days, as that was one of the #1 priorities that families shared with us, a consistent schedule and keeping cohorts together, or keeping siblings cohorted together on the same day. Cindy, thank you. In this hybrid model, students would also be given a district laptop, and we would see an average of class sizes between 12 and 20. And this is because we essentially are splitting things in half with the cohorting. So due to the cohorting, we'd be looking at class sizes of 12 to 20. In addition, we do have a team crafting protocols for thorough cleaning of our buses, our classrooms, and high contact surfaces, and protocols that would allow us to keep that in place during the day and during the week that we are there. We, of course, would highly encourage all students and staff to wear face masks and coverings, and that there's more information that needs to be determined with that from ODE guidance and from our governor in terms of students and staff, but for now we can say we're highly encouraging with more information to come. And from the hybrid model, we can shift the component of that is we can shift into short-term distance learning if needed for public health concerns. So generally the short-term distance learning is going to be for less than 4 weeks. Just again, sometimes we talk about comprehensive learning and short-term learning and it gets a little confusing. So short-term, less than 4 weeks generally, and it's if we need to shift into that. Maybe we have partial students that are quarantined, or not all of the students in the school are needing to be in short-term distance learning. In both the comprehensive and the hybrid model, it's important to note that our high school students would enroll in 4 classes per quarter, earning 0.5 credit per class per quarter. And I'm going to say this again, which is equal to one credit a class per semester. So now that's a little bit confusing, but rather than doing semesters, which we usually have 8 courses, we're splitting that in half to 4 for a quarter. Gives kids the opportunity to focus. Looking at that, some of the feedback that we've gotten from parents with screen time and allowing them to earn that credit, which would be equal to a semester. This would allow students to also earn 7 to 8 credits a year, which is typically what we do in any given year if we were not in the pandemic and in this situation. We're still working on what it would look like for middle school and elementary, but we fully plan to have robust scheduling and courses. In addition, it would allow middle school and high school to take electives and elementary students to engage in their specials as well. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide. And finally, our NCESD virtual online program model will allow for an interactive educational experience with teachers and peers, also using video when appropriate and figuring out how we would do that. Students, as in the other models, would be provided a district laptop. And in this model, I think the important thing for us to note is that we are asking students and families to commit to a full year if they choose this option, as we are currently working to determine the number of students that can be served in this model. So this would be a full year online that you would be moving into. I want to note that our comprehensive distance learning model and our NCSD virtual model will both be much more robust than what we experienced in the spring with distance learning for all. I think that's an important piece to point out. And so I can stop and take questions and with the team prior to turning over to Cindy for the health and safety precautions.
Thank you. Directors, any questions?
Director McVeigh?
Director McVeigh?
Yeah. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks Shay for this. A lot of work already has gone into this and I probably have some remedial questions. But I was listening to OPB this morning and they were talking about that some of the school districts are really struggling with these split or hybrid models for IB diplomas. Does this allow for our 21 graduates to get an IB diploma, and if it does it also put the juniors behind?
We haven't dug into that detail yet. I believe just looking at the model that we're putting forth, because we would still be asking students to take the same amount of courses in a year that it would allow us to do the IB diploma without putting anybody behind, but we would need to look at the additional requirements and criteria that students are required to do in the IB program. And oftentimes when students do that, a lot of that, they're doing that, you know, on their own or within the classes of the IB courses that they're taking. So I believe so, but we're still working on that detail.
Okay. And then I just have two quick questions. Was there any thought, or maybe it's in the further of the presentation, of having a different model for maybe our K through 2 kiddos who I think it's more difficult to have any sort of an online model with real engagement for that those grades?
Yeah, so we actually have been looking at our K2 model. We were just having this conversation today. What does this look like for a kindergartner or first grader to be online trying to learn? And we have not finalized or settled out what we would do, but definitely in the conversation at this point.
Thank you. And my last question is, I'm sure all of these, at the same time we're looking at class schedules, we're looking at how we can support daycare through this scheduling nightmare.
Matt or Cindy, do you want to jump in on that one at all?
That is in one of my slides.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Director McVeigh. Any other questions? Bowers, Director Bauer, do I see you?
Yeah, I did have just a couple. CTE classes, I mean, that's probably on your list. Just wondering how we could handle some of those, if at all, or how you would do that. And the electives, music, and I know I've been reading the reports and they just are saying how difficult it is to control spread of disease and fire and some of those.
Yeah, so, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have more, Director Bauer?
No, thank you.
Director Perez, go ahead, Shay.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, Karen Phillips has been deeply involved in the conversations as we've been putting these models together with Save and Challenge. And because students would be able to take their full course loads, they will have access to Saban. However, that's going to look very different than it does typically when we're at the site. And as you know, CTE often lends itself to hands-on experiences. So this is going to be difficult in terms of giving online learning around what this looks like. We're going to have to look at where can we do virtual labs and what equipment and what technology equipment is needed in order to be able to do that. We've also had conversation where are there places where we can send kits home with kids where they can do the project-based learning with the guidance of the teacher. And also looking at where are the programs that maybe we do need to continue to have a small group of students show up in order to have that experience, and what grade level is that at. So for an example of that would be our land lab. And so out with our, with our animals at the barn and the work that goes into that. So there's certain things we're looking at around that, but the students will definitely have access. Students will have access to choir and band. PE is another one of the high contact, high risk areas. We don't know what that looks like yet. With the hybrid, there has to be several different cleaning protocols, several different protocols in terms of social distancing. Choir is a difficult one for us, and we have not landed on what that would look like, but definitely in the conversation, we know it's important for kids to have a well-rounded and robust education.
You other directors, Director Perez, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. 4 months I've been on these Zoom calls and I thought I had it all figured out, and we just realized that my camera was backwards for the last 10 minutes. But so my question is, so Shay, two questions. First one is, what's the clear distinction between the comprehensive distance and the online? That's first question.
Yeah, so comprehensive distance learning can turn into hybrid learning, in-person hybrid learning at any point when we feel that the public health situation is under control. And it could also go back and forth depending on what happens with the cases. The online model, you're committing to online for the year. And we know we have families that is what they are interested in. We don't want a hybrid for the year. So that, I would say those are probably the major distinction. And I would say curriculum will probably be another component of the difference. On the online, we will be partnering with some of our vendors in the same way that Clackamas Web Academy does in our district versus how we do in the comprehensive with our teachers.
Okay. And then the second question is for the comprehensive distance model, do we know, or is there a plan for how often we'll be interacting with those children, or how often the teachers will be interacting with those children, our children?
Yeah, we were just having this conversation today. What we know, if we're looking at this value of care and making sure our kids have connection and social emotional learning, there has to be connection every day from our teachers. I think the question is what does that look like, and how many, teachers? What are the schedule, and what does the schedule look like for students? And those are some of the details that we're still working on.
Thank you, Shay.
Thank you, Director. Is anyone else?
Director Schrader?
Director Schrader.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say, start off by saying thank you, but this board needs to meet in person and be willing to meet in person and feel safe meeting in person if we're going to be putting students in schools. With that said, the survey that we took that shows 31% of teachers are considering leaving the profession or taking a leave of absence, I think that's based on the current pandemic numbers that we have in the state currently. If they go down, then that number probably will max. If the number goes up, I think that number will go up. And so that's more of a statement up front. Do you have questions about bus protocols? And please don't take the questions as, because I'm trying to be efficient with time, as being they're too direct. It's just time is limited. So how many students are you projecting on a bus that typically holds 70?
I think Cindy, my colleague, is going to cover transportation a little bit. I don't know. Cindy, do you want to answer that now, or are you intending to address that?
I can ask you later time.
Yep, it is in part of our slides.
So I'll let that one go. It just, you did touch on bus, so I thought maybe perhaps. On the AB cohort, if we have it in person and the A always is on Monday and we have 13 bank holidays, is that really going to work well, or should that be the planning day? And we do, Tuesday through Friday. Has that been at least considered? Not looking for a resolution, just has anybody brought that up?
Yes, we have currently looked at the calendar to see how many holidays, off days are on each day of the week, so maximize instruction, but that is one of the components that we're looking at. Also listening to the priorities of our families with that, with consistency. Do we need to have a day in the middle of the week for cleaning? Those are all on the table, and the flex day could be any day of the week, depending on what the highest priority and need is.
And the last one, I think, is just, of course, it's for information. So we learn, board members always need to be open until the vote actually happens. So that means we're in this learning process. So that's more for the community to hear, that we're always learning until we actually have the vote. I kind of heard masks as a kind of an ask. We're not able to require masks, or what is guidance for the state of Oregon as far as masks with public education versus public employees?
Matt, would you like to step in on this one?
Yeah, we can require employees to wear masks, but the current guidance from ODE and the Oregon Health Authority is that we cannot require students to wear masks. I've been in multiple meetings this week with ODE, and I believe there is going to be some new guidance that is going to come out regarding masks and students in the next couple of days. But the current guidance is staff, yes, students strongly recommended at this point. but not required.
And the last question I have is EL and IEP going to be up later in the conversation for tonight? How we're addressing services?
Yeah, there are a lot of different guidance, well, a lot of different requirements with our ELD students and our students with disability that we need to continue to flush out. Some of it will be based on what the actual model is that we land on and when, and also the schedules. And so we are in the process of putting some work groups together. It is extremely complex, as you know, but we are absolutely working on it at lightning speed, and we'll have details for that soon, I believe.
Thank you, Shay James. And
Thank you, Director Strado. Any other directors have questions? Or
I do. Sorry.
Director Day?
Okay, thanks. So I know a lot of my answers have been, questions have been answered, so thank you, rest of the board members. My quick question is around the additional support to teachers. I know that I'm also really disheartened by the data around some of them, just wanting to leave the profession, and it's really disheartening for me. And so I would want to find ways, better ways of really supporting our teachers in the school year with whatever model that we adopt. So my question around that was, do we have a work from home policy for our teachers that, again, take into consideration, really supporting them, right, in terms of, logging in, working from home for, 5+ hours? And do we also have, are we also considering providing teachers with things that they would need so that they have a really functional work environment, like computers, right? Like a desk chair, just really practical things, because I know that a lot of workplaces are really having to also accommodate to their workforce. So I guess that would be a question for either Matt or Shay or whoever.
Sure, I can take that. I would say that we're in multi-day conversations with our association leadership each week. And these are conversations that we're having. I think too, it's going to come down also to the model that we select, because each model could mean different things for what potential leaves could look like, what potential accommodations can look like. And we're also having to work out both, I think, at the local level as well as the state level of what are those leave options, and what is an appropriate use for a leave. And those are questions that we still are going to have some conversations and agreements with our association leadership on. But they're happening, and they will continue to happen until we have those settled. One of the nice things, if we do end up in a comprehensive distance learning model, we did have 3 months of distance learning for all. And we were able to work through some of those, issues. All of our teachers have a computer, but we know that a comprehensive distance learning model is going to need to be much more robust, much more engaging, more significant instruction than what we did in the spring. And that is going to require, I think, some continued professional development for our teachers as well. So all of those are on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Benaloga, you have a question?
Yes, I had just a couple of questions. I just want to clarify, do we still have enough laptops to be 1-to-1? So we have enough laptops, or are we needing to purchase additional laptops?
We currently have enough laptops to give all 17,000 of our students. However, some of those laptops are ending their lifespan. And we know that we have about 2,000 computers that if we could replace them, we need to replace them.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And I have a question about IEPs. Has there been any discussion about the service time, the direct instruction time that are on those IEPs? I know that they are it's very time consuming. But we need to look at those pieces. So what has the discussion been around the service time with those IEPs?
Yeah, this is the conversation we're currently in, and part of it depends on which model we go with, and also looking at assessing students that were scheduled to be assessed in the spring, so that we could make some of those determinations. So yes, we will be looking at all of the IEPs, making sure that we're getting the minutes required, as that's part of the blueprint. But it's going to look different depending on what the model is. So we're looking at it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I had a question about IAs. Are we going to be able to utilize instructional assistants in a different way, in a better way this coming year, depending upon the model that we go into?
Yes, and again, you just said it, it depends on the model that we go into, in which ways that we would support students and some of the requirements that we would need to meet. But we are definitely looking at that from all different angles.
Okay, excellent. And I just had one last question about just parents that are specifically maybe challenged with understanding and navigating the technology. What are we, and I know this is a huge question, but what are we going to do to make sure that parents understand the options? Maybe there's a language barrier, a technology barrier, or what are we going to do as a district to make sure that our parents understand and that they feel supported and they feel like they can make a good decision for their child?
Cindy, are you going to cover that in yours, or should I, or do you want to jump in now with that?
Yeah, it's not in tonight's presentation. It'll certainly be based on the feedback that we get through these current surveys that are out there. We'll know how many haven't responded, which is as important data as those who have. Oftentimes it's those who have not responded that we need to do some further outreach and support. We are talking to our new director of technology about some opportunities for some helplines and some help desks. But getting all that information out early to help families make the decision, I think is a very well appreciated comment. And we know we need to do that. We're just too early in our stages to be able to provide any details at this point.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Benaloga, I would remind all board members that any communication that we're putting out regarding our models and communication for what the fall looks like is translated in all the major languages of our school district as well.
Okay.
So we don't send anything out just in English. It's in multiple languages.
Excellent. That was another question. So thank you for answering that.
Thank you. Director McVeigh, you said you had one more question.
Yes, just to follow up, for high school families that choose, if there still is a 100% online model, I'm assuming they probably wouldn't be eligible for after school activities if they chose that model, or would they?
Absolutely would at their home high school, depending on what it was. We would be following the OSAA guidelines in terms of activities that are connected to there, and of course as many students as we can keep connected to any type of clubs that would be happening or anything else. We would absolutely want to support our students with that at the home high schools.
So they wouldn't have to justify why they're choosing a 100% online model then?
No.
That was really critical, Director McVeigh, in how we're thinking about structuring that online model. Is we're keeping it as a district program and not a standalone school. And by keeping it as a district program, the students will stay enrolled in their neighborhood school, and then we'll have the opportunity to engage in those extracurricular activities from their neighborhood school.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the answer.
Okay, I have a few questions. So I want to be clear about the teachers seeing 12 to 20 students in the cohorts, right? That same teacher sees all A cohorts and B cohorts, right?
That is correct.
So if there's an outbreak in the A cohort, the entire school is then at risk.
Not necessarily. We would be turning over all of our contact tracing logs to the health authority, Clackamas County Health Authority, that we would work with, and they would make the determination at that point of who would be quarantined and who would not. So there might be cases where it's a substantial group that is shut down, and they might tell us only X amount of students need to be quarantined. And so it would depend. Within the AB, right, there's multiple cohorts within that day because students would be in different classes as well. So it gets very complicated very quickly.
But if I'm a teacher seeing 12 to 20 on A, and a student in that class, in that cohort gets affected, I'm in the contact tracing list for A and B.
Correct.
Yes.
Teacher, I'm now out of commission.
We do not make that determination, is what is been clearly to us. That would be the health authority would be making that decision of who's quarantined and who's not.
Okay. And so then my next comment is just a kind of a suggestion for us in the future as we go through these plans, because it seems like we have a theme in questions from our directors, and that's like the financial impact and the accommodation impact, right? So some of these things, if we could somehow just quickly note by it, like a moderate or high impact financially or low impact financially, a high impact in terms of accommodations for our students of special needs, a low impact, just so we can all have a quick snapshot of these particular models and the things that we're trying to do and the impact of it, because all those things are things we have to vote on. So instead of us asking you, nickel and diming you with those questions, just give us the quick snapshot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then in summary, before we move on to the next session, there's a couple of things that I heard that we want to review for the next time in terms of details. We're looking for the high contact and high risk list of things that you guys are going to work through. So that's CTE, K through 2. What are we doing there? The bus protocol I know is coming up. The ELD student protocol, the IA usage, the parent training, IEPs, and then I just requested the impact comments just to be placed on there for next time. Okay, are we ready for the next section?
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, in addition to the instructional model, which had to come first and had to be outlined, there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. Part of our blueprints include several pieces of information and plans that must be in place before we can open any of these models. Those things include a communicable disease management plan, just as you were talking about what happens if there is an outbreak, how does that communication pattern happen, who makes that determination, what if someone becomes ill at school, how do you isolate? All of those protocols will be in a written plan and available to our public for review. In addition, there are very specific physical distancing protocols. As you see there in the photo is our facilities manager, Rob Martinez, measuring a classroom. We have over 1,400 classrooms in our school district, and we have had to make sure that we have the measurement for each of those, minus things like cabinetry and other. It's the usable space to make sure that we are not putting more students and staff in particular spaces that we should not be. There are tracking protocols that Shay referred to. We do believe we can do this electronically now. The ESD has taken this on as a service that they could provide through our student information system. That was fantastic news that we got just today as we were trying to figure out, how do you do this? A clipboard and you pass around a pen did not seem like a great idea. hygiene protocols, making sure that we are teaching those, especially those littles, how to properly hand wash and how to go through food lines, how to pick up, grab and go foods, etc. We'll talk about nutrition services as well. And then there are all kinds of cleaning and disinfecting and ventilation protocols. Our maintenance staff has been extremely busy testing all of our school ventilation systems and making sure that we are optimizing airflow and following all of the guidelines that have been provided to make sure that we are not doing something that would adversely affect the ventilation systems.
Can I interrupt for a second? Hello?
Who's that?
My name is Michael.
Oh, no, you cannot interrupt at this time. It is not protocol for you to interrupt. I'm sorry. Go ahead and submit public comment to our board secretary, but that's unfortunately not the way that these meetings go.
In our operational planning, we have our website is up and running, and so you can make sure that you have access to that. There's just a snapshot of that in the bottom left-hand corner, where we will make sure that all of this information is available to the public as these decisions get made. We have to follow several of those protocols around attendance and making sure we can do the contact tracing properly. We talked a little bit earlier about the number of laptops that will be needed and what technology supports will be needed to put these plans in place, including the supports for families and teachers. Transportation, we have been doing several things in that regard. There is not a ton of guidance from ODE on the number of students that you can put on a bus. There's been some conversations. We've looked at some other states' protocols and guidance as well. But with the hybrid model, we can pretty much guess that we would be going through neighborhoods twice during the week in terms of different cohorts. And so if there were 60 students on a bus on a route last year, you can expect half of that many to be on each route in this particular model. However, we have a number of families who have said, we will find our own transportation this year because we are not comfortable with that level of contact. And so we are looking at every other seat, only one child per seat. And we are also, today we did a trial run on how much time would it take to disinfect a bus between routes. And so I haven't heard the results of that, but we had our directors in our transportation department going through and timing and filming how to properly disinfect and timing and seeing what, if we need to change some of our route times and possibly some start times to school by 10 minutes, 5 minutes, it's unknown yet at this time. We will continue to feed our students as we have since we closed down in March. That will look different depending on the model that the family selects, but it will most likely be a similar type of grab and go model. Even when students are in school, we do not want them going through lines. There's no salad bar, but there will be food options, and we will be meeting the nutritional guidelines for that and making sure that we provide both breakfast and lunches for our students. The facility use, we have a number of renters that, youth sports and churches and all kinds of folks that are used to renting and using our facilities when school is not in session. And at this time, that has all been closed. And so we will need to make determinations based on county phasing openings if that changes or not. The CARE program, which was asked about earlier, we are running several scenarios on how could we maintain and keep our CARE programs open at their current sites in that type of cohort model. And could we also possibly run a one classroom full day model in that same space? And we don't have determinations yet, but we are doing the research. We are also convened a group of stakeholders and local care facilities, some of our faith leaders, to determine how can we assist the rest of our community in maybe lifting up their own care programs. How do we help families connect with each other so that they could have small cohorts of before or after school care, or on the non-school days if they're in the hybrid model. We have a number of families interested in that, and we too are interested in being a hub and a facilitation for some of that conversation to happen. Extracurricular and athletics programs are still up in the air until we can move into phase 2. Our athletic directors are ready to stand up their athletic programs for the fall at our high schools at the very least, so that but we have to meet all of those guidelines. And thus far in phase 1, that's been very, very difficult. And so we are hoping to move into a phase 2 at some point to be able to at least get teams together. But so far we're not going that far. And the OSAA guidance has been fairly limited up to this point as well. But we will continue to work on that as new information comes forward. And I think, oh, we have one more. Communications, as I said, we have our website up and running. We will continue to share in parent letters in multiple languages. We are working with our charter schools who do have to submit their own blueprint plans, but a lot of that, they can use a lot of our information, but they are responsible for making sure that they have theirs in place as well. Our HR team and our executive team has been working with our employee association leadership and making sure that we are following all of our agreements and our contracts. We tried to get out ahead of things and are doing a pretty good job right now. Supply chain can be difficult in times like this to make sure that we have all of the materials that we need in place to safely open. So what you see there in that photo is a couple of our maintenance staff installing a plastic barrier at a desk. And you can see this one needs to be suspended from the ceiling because there isn't a good way in this particular workspace to do it any other way. If you came to the district office, you would see a different type of barrier at the front receptionist desk. But we are installing those. We are purchasing face coverings for all of our staff. We are ordering and making sure we have all the disinfectants on hand, et cetera. There's a lot of purchasing that's happening in this, and yes, it is costly. And then after we have all these things in place, we need to make sure everybody has the proper training, the professional development to effectively put all of these plans into place. This is no small undertaking, as I know that you understand. But we wanted to make sure that you also heard about all of the protocols that are happening behind the scenes. And with that, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Matt for closing comments, as well as take any of your questions.
I think we'll take questions first, right, Matt?
On the operational pieces, yes.
Okay. And I just want to reiterate before I acknowledge directors that have questions, all that are listening, we truly appreciate you listening. Unfortunately, in this system, there is a protocol to get your comments heard. And so you can submit those to our board secretary, and then we will hear them. You can also email each one of us as elected officials. It is our job to listen to you. So you can email each one of us, and our emails are on the website. And last but not least, I highly encourage you to keep attending so that when you do have comments and things you want to say, you're informed with those things, so that we can try to work from the information that's been provided. Directors, anyone have a question? I'm actually going to call you out because I cannot see you. So I'm going to call you out just to make sure that we keep some structure. Director Banaloga, do you have any questions about the logistics and operations that Cindy just went through?
Yes, just a couple of questions. I'm assuming there's going to be possibly signage or education about COVID-19. Do we have plans to have those in other languages as well and be able to post those, or?
Yes, we have been working on signs probably the last 3 or 4 weeks. We had several of them installed already in the spring as we brought students back to pick up items, or we had some of our seniors come back, as you know, for those graduation video. So yeah, we have several things already done, and we've continued to do that.
Okay, excellent. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about just accountability in each building. What are the discussions about just accountability, and as far as sanitizing and space, and just someone in the building kind of overseeing and having some accountability for what's happening at each building? I understand the district directors are very important, but what are we doing at the building level to make sure that that someone's following through?
Yeah, great question. We have a couple different things. Our supervisor for our custodians will be doing trainings. Our custodians are back working, and so they've been going through some of those trainings already. And we will make sure that they have a checklist every day, basically, to go through, just like you might see in a restaurant restroom, where you can see that somebody has come in and checked off that they've been in and done that cleaning. In addition to that, our risk manager and their department there did a training, video training in the spring around social distancing. And we recorded that, and so that is still available. And as our workforce comes back to the buildings, one of the requirements is to go through that video and make sure that they are aware of it. And each school has what we're calling a social distancing officer who is in charge to make sure that everybody's had that training, and also to walk through the building to make sure things are happening and getting done. And it's not going to be perfect. Large school systems, but we are absolutely putting the things in place that we know are going to make sure that we have those pieces in place, so that if there's a substitute or somebody that's coming in, that we can easily transfer that process to them.
All right, excellent, thank you. And I have a quick question about PACE. As far as transportation and childcare, how is our PACE program going to be affected by the limitations?
Yeah, I have not worked with our PACE program on any of these particular pieces yet. Some of our specialty programs, our magnet schools, et cetera, we'll need to have a further conversation about. Do we open the daycare at Sabin? We don't even know that we can do that. There's restrictions around what care sites can do, which is not PACE, but it's related to that program as well. So more to come.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Bellanloga. Director Perez, do you have any questions?
Actually, I just have a quick comment. Just want to say this by no means is easy times we're in, and just want to applaud Matt and all of the staff, all the admin, going there into the trenches every day, and to ensure that we get those 5 areas: equity, engagement, and care, integrity, excellence for the kids, for our students. And also, I just want to say real quick, I saw 59 participants. That's awesome, because it takes a village. Please continue to come in, send in questions. This more than ever now, we need a village. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Perez. Director Way.
Thank you, Chair Ford. I do also just have 3 questions for Cindy and team. Thank you again for that overview. I know that there is still a lot of unknowns and a lot that we have to uncover and discover and create future plans for. So one of my questions is around the Wichita Family Center, and we all know that a lot of families utilize that for food pantry, for clothing, back to school supplies, things like that. So will that also still be operational, with COVID guidelines? I'm just asking because, what this pandemic is showing is that it's only worsening the disparities, right, between different communities and particularly, families who have been underserved historically. So I wanted to ask if again, if as a district we're still trying to provide that resource.
Yes, absolutely. It's been open since schools closed in March in a limited capacity. So as you know, they've continued to provide food for our families. A couple of our partner agencies who also work out of that facility are starting to come back, so that we have like our WIC office and some of our mental health providers. Our dental team is ready to stand up and provide dental services as is allowed by whatever state guidelines will be in place. So it probably will open different functions at different phases, but it's absolutely our intent to continue to offer as many of those services as we can.
That's excellent. And related to that, I know that we, I think one of my proudest achievements in our district is that we have wonderful school-based health centers, and we have had young people in the past who really have provided just such powerful testimony around, just the healthcare and the preventive services and the social emotional help that they've been able to receive. So will those also be operating, and will they also be playing a role in working with public health to do, additional testing or screening?
Yeah, similar to Wichita, our two school-based health centers remained open for services since schools closed in March. But it did look different. They might have had limited hours. At one point, they did move to telehealth appointments. They're still doing that as well throughout the summer. They've provided those services for our students and as needed. We have not had the conversation yet, at least at this table, we have not had the conversation about what role they may play with the county as far as COVID goes, but I'm sure that Michael Rawls has been having that conversation, or it's been a conversation at the county level. The county actually is the service provider for our Putnam School-Based Health Center, and so that would be a natural fit for whatever happens there. We have a different agency that provides services for Milwaukee High School, and in 2021 we'll be opening 2 more, both at Clackamas High School and at Adrian C. Nelson High School.
Yes, thank you so much. That's really exciting to hear that there's hopefully going to be some collaboration happening with the facilities that we already have, and again, potential just collaborating more with the health department. So I guess just my last question is maybe a very simple question, but I'm trying to understand this. Are we going to be providing any on-site screening or COVID testing for students? Like, I know that some businesses in different parts of the country are, taking temperatures of people, and one might argue, wow, that's a little bit too extreme and too intrusive. So has there been discussions with the health department around what level of preventative care, school districts might be playing, or staff?
There will not be a daily screening for all. There are protocols that will be in place for anybody who seems to be feeling ill or showing symptoms of being ill. And those protocols will all be in the blueprint that you'll see us release in August. There have not been conversations, again, at this table about the schools actually providing any COVID tests, but as you already alluded to, that perhaps that is a service that our school health centers would be providing. I just don't have that answer tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I know that has been, I think a pretty big barrier, especially for folks who also may not have health insurance, or may have, just again, not have the opportunity to go to the go to a traditional clinic or, a hospital. So I'm just trying to think a little bit outside of the box here about how we can also provide preventative health care to families in our district.
One of those items we purchased really early on are several hundred thermometers. So we are doing that. And parents are supposed to acknowledge on a daily basis that they're taking temperatures at home. If they don't have one, that is a different issue that, we'll work around trying to get some resources. But there is this level of responsibility. Certainly employees are supposed to say, I checked my temperature coming into the building today. And all of that will be in the protocols.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director McVeigh.
I just have one quick question. Is there any anything that we can or can't do in terms of disclosing to tracers about our students?
Well, certainly any other educational record would not be available to them, just their contact information, I would assume, and that we would follow all the HIPAA guidelines that outline what we can and cannot share. I have not delved into that level of detail in what happens when you talk with the county, but our risk management team and our nurses have been working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Schradel.
Thank you. We'll start with the bus question. It's more of a math question, and it's open to anybody. I'll start by saying I'd be welcome to have a detailed response at a later date. But if we take a standard 70-person bus, and then we say every other row, and it's only one person per row. So first, we have one person per row, so that we go from 70 to 35, but then it's every other row, we get down into this 16, 17 person range and not the 30 range, unless you're going to be putting two students side by side in every other row. So I see that as a math problem, but then I also would say it's more of an HR problem, because we would probably need more bus drivers, and we equally would have challenging to get that, but we don't know what will happen. I mean, there could be a surrounding school district that's online only, and then we actually could be renting from First Student, where we typically couldn't get drivers or buses before. So that was more of a statement, because I'm not sure if you have an answer on my math question.
Just a brief one. We have seen some sketches or models, I guess, of different ways to seat students on buses, where one might be against a window and the other one, the first two rows are both against the window, or you might stagger first row right side, second row left side. So there's different models out there, and depends on the size of the buses. We have different sizes as well. But really there's no guidance right now from the state level on how many students. It's silent. So it's very possible that we will see some further bus guidance in the next iteration of the document that's going to come out. I think it comes out maybe the end of this month. I think might be the next edition.
I would say that's a very concerning item for me. Also, you know, would there be a monitor on the bus, because the bus driver has to focus on the safety of the bus and not what's going on with the K through 5, and we have already heard that masks cannot be required. So I'll just say that will have questions, and
we share all those same concerns and questions, and anytime we've been at a state level meeting with representatives from districts across the state, those same concerns continue to get raised.
and the other one's more of a facility one, and that's more of a report, not asking for, but hopefully we would have the data already, so it would be able to be shared, that shows all our properties that would have student and staff, and what kind of ventilation they have. Are they MERV 8? Have they been upgraded to MERV 13? Are they fresh air input only? And then what happens when it gets cold out? And we will have an increased cost to heat fresh air versus recirculating air that's already preheated.
We spoke with that vendor today, that manufacturer, to make sure that we had the data on all of our systems. So it's forthcoming.
Appreciate that. And do you think we'll have enough drivers? I mean, I know I asked for monitors, but that's going to come out. And did you cover PPE, or is that further?
It was mentioned in the supply chain of what we are purchasing and providing. We did not give a detailed list of it, but we will be providing masks for our staff, face shields, those plastic barriers. So those types of materials will be provided. Staff can certainly wear their own if they're more comfortable with that, but they do not need to go purchase their own if they don't have one, or if there's, some of them are using disposable ones. We would provide a cloth mask as well as a face shield.
And I'm not sure if there's going to be another question and answer after Superintendent Underback, or there's things that we didn't touch on that are highly concerning to me. Do you want me to put them out now, or?
We'll have another section after Matt closes out where we'll have more comments.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Director Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Ford, and I apologize for, I had bad connection, and it was very frustrating, and I was thinking, how difficult it is for our students too, if they don't have reliable quality broadband. And I want to commend the district for making sure that we had those connections for our students earlier in the spring, that you stepped up and covered for, I believe, a year, those connections, and they will continue. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. But experiencing that was frustrating for me, and I wondered what I missed. So I apologize if I missed the answers to these questions already. But I just wanted to comment that, again, that 49.5% teachers at risk and have a family member at risk, and care is so important to us. Also, we don't have coverage of liability insurance right now for COVID, do we? Our PACE insurance does not cover that. Is that
That's
correct?
my understanding, correct?
That is correct. No school districts really in the country right now are covered by their school insurance for a communicable disease, and that includes COVID right now.
So yeah, that is concerning. Maybe the legislature will take it up. We're not sure yet. So that's ongoing. My other question is, how much time, well, I was just, the hardest problem I have in my mind is what responsibilities and new responsibilities will our teachers have under each one of these plans? And I tried to think, what will a day for a week look like for a student, and what will it look like for a teacher? And I don't expect you to answer that now. The reports that I read have required minutes and have encouraged, more interaction. So that part is good. But if you're doing a hybrid and a teacher is teaching 2 days with one group, 2 days with the other, they're not really available much to help the other A cohort or B. And I know there will be 1 day for office hours, but still that's going to be tough as far as teaching. And then who's going to be doing all the cleaning? And you don't have to answer these now.
So you don't want to answer, Director Bauer?
Well, if she has the answer, fine. If she doesn't, you can answer later.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about the instruction, those are all pieces we definitely have to work through, and we have other staff who will not be utilized fully because the job is different now. And so we have instructional assistants, so we could maybe move over to do some of the outreach to families. At the high school level, we have our study hall teachers. There are other staff in our counselors, but we have not gotten to that level of detail as we work through that with our union leadership. And as far as the cleaning goes, once we have our cleaning protocols in place, we'll do the training, and we'll have to see what makes sense depending on the model and who's available to do that and how often. The high touch surface areas for certainly it just depends on what kind of staffing we have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I just have one statement based on everything. Well, two. One, this is a lot of work. And I know that you guys, we have a lot of things that we still need to get information on. So I want to just recap on that from the board. There was the PACE programming, the school-based health center, the screening or testing at our facilities potentially, and then the contact tracing and student information, those details, understanding that a little bit better, bus protocol, cleaning protocols, and our property ventilation information. So just to kind of, summarize what the board is kind of leaning towards, if we can make sure that when you guys are still fleshing out the details, that we just ping those so that everyone feels like they've been satisfied. And the only other statement I want to make, just from my standpoint and observation of what we've heard, I want to make sure that we're designing a lot of new things for the district, a lot of new terms, and a lot of new titles. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping equity in mind when we're doing this. I just heard in passing, and you guys know that words are important to me. So I heard the word social distancing officer. So just being very conscious of the words that we're going to be entering into our system, since we are in control of these new terms. Let's make sure that they're equitable and it feels good for folks as we move forward. Okay, so moving on to the closing, Matt. Are you ready to rock and roll?
I am. So clearly that was a lot of information. And I just want to provide some additional context in closing comments, and then yes, we'll be available to take some more general questions. On June 10th, the Oregon Department of Education released its guidance on Ready Schools, Safe Learners. And that guidance, which is what we're building these models around, was designed within a context that by the time school started in the fall, we would have flattened the curve for COVID, and we would be seeing declining rates. And that is not the case. The models that we are building towards really are designed to have strong social distancing protocols, hygiene protocols in place. But what they do not take into account is what's happening outside the walls of our schools. And I believe that the state and others are beginning to see the disconnect between what we were being asked to build and the reality now in which we're building. So we're seeing, certainly in Oregon and across the country, dramatic increases in COVID cases, COVID transmission. I believe today, nearly 70,000 Americans were newly infected or identified as being infected with the coronavirus. And that seems to be reaching a new high every day or close to every day. We have struggles in this country with testing and testing results now taking up to 2 weeks, which makes putting into place contact tracing protocols and cohorting extremely challenging. We're once again back to where we were in March and April with personal protection equipment and struggling to get that. Not only for our healthcare workers, but we haven't returned students to school yet. We have said as a school district, and I have said in numerous letters that I've written as my time in 8 years as your superintendent, when we have had tragedies in our school district or tragic events in our state and our country, I have often started my letters to our community and to our staff, where I say the safety of our students and staff is our top priority. I'm struggling right now as we build these models with that statement, because what we know is that even with the best of plans in bringing students back to school, we know that we will have students and staff that will get infected with this virus. It's been communicated to us by our leaders at the Oregon Department of Education as well as our local health authorities. So I'm struggling with the fact that we're going to be, if we choose to bring students back into our school system, we're going to be doing that knowingly that there is going to be students who are going to be and staff that are going to get infected. And we know the impacts of this infection. While certainly the extreme is folks passing from this, we also know that there are long-term health impacts to folks who get infected with this virus. Some known and some unknown, right? We are still learning that. So I share all that with you tonight with a growing concern about having our students and staff return to our schools in the fall. The virus is still raging out of control. And I'm not sure that having folks return to our schools is saying to our staff and our students and our parents that safety is our top priority. So over the next coming days, I have directed our staff to begin to look at what the comprehensive distance learning model should look like and putting greater emphasis in the design of that model compared to some of the other models. I'm worried that should we head into a hybrid model, it is likely within 2 to 3 weeks, or maybe sooner, that we will have an outbreak in our schools, and we would be forced into a distance learning model, short-term distance learning model. We would then be in that short-term distance learning model for a couple of weeks. We would bring students back, and we would, within a couple of weeks, likely be back into a short-term distance learning model again. And we are going, in our 32 schools, we are going to have some schools that are closed, some schools where these 5 classrooms are closed, some schools in which, you know, these 10 students are quarantined, some schools where, and it's going to be, we're not going to know what, we will know, but it's going to be incredibly disruptive. And I don't think that puts our parents in a great position either, where at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, we get a call from the local health department and that says, you need to shut down this wing of a school tomorrow morning. It's putting our parents in an incredibly difficult position. It's putting our kids in a difficult position. So how do we open schools, right, where we can say that care and safety is truly our top priority? How can we limit the trauma that our students and our families and staff are going to experience when students get sick, staff members get sick, when we're constantly opening and closing our schools? That produces trauma. And I put all that within the context of, I know that all of us want our kids back in school. That is the place where we thrive, our kids thrive. We know how to do that well. But I also believe, as we continue to monitor this over the coming weeks, I believe we're going to need to figure out how to do comprehensive distance learning exceptionally well. Because I believe if that ends up being the recommendation that I bring forward to you, or we end up being forced to move there because of the outbreaks in our schools, we know that comprehensive distance learning needs to be better, needs to be more robust than what we experienced in the spring. No one on my team would argue with that statement. And I believe there are some advantages moving forward to a comprehensive distance learning model. And that is some ongoing consistency and a schedule for our students and our families that is predictable. Right? Not only does it provide for a greater level of safety for our students and our staff, right? It's going to provide daily interaction with an educator in our school district versus a hybrid model that only is going to guarantee that on 2 days out of the 5 days a week. It seems to be looking at a comprehensive distance learning model also seems to be today really a prudent way and a safe way of managing the system that we're living in. It seems to make more sense to me is to open in a comprehensive distance learning model. And when we feel that we have this virus in a safer place than we do today, we can then begin to have the conversation about returning students in person into our buildings. It's a similar model that we are using to open up our states with this phased approach. So I just want to share that with you. I think the other piece that I would be remiss if I did not bring this forward, and you also referenced this earlier, trying to design 4 models right now is not particularly realistic for our staff. And I believe that if we can begin to concentrate on one model and hit a home run with that model versus trying to put pieces together for all 4, we're going to serve our students better. So I know you'll have some questions regarding what I just shared. I would also say I'll be working with our board chairs to bring you back together as a board should you choose, likely within 2 weeks, so we can give you yet another update on where we are regarding our thinking and our planning, reviewing where we are as a county and a state with this virus, And that board meeting then would come 2 weeks before you'll be asked to look at our plan and potentially take action on it should you choose to do that. So with that, I am open to, or my staff are open to additional questions should you have them.
So once again, I'll go out and call people out. But before we begin, I first want to recognize that this is a very difficult task. We are asking the district to make decisions about life and death of our youth and our staff and the families that live in this district. With your comments, I'm requesting that each board member, of course, if you have questions and comments, whatever is on your mind, whatever you've taken notes on, do that. But if you could directly speak to what Superintendent Utterback was talking about, the care, the trauma, and the emphasis possibly being more on the comprehensive distance learning model versus something else. If you can directly speak to that, I think it's important that we as a board speak to what he's talking about and allow him to have the strength of all of us behind them as they continue to plan instead of them walking away unsure. So again, whatever questions you have is fine, whatever comments you have, but please speak directly to what you just heard Superintendent speak to. So we'll start with Director Perez.
I've been in this community since 2001. I've been honored to be a part of this community. And, you know, when Matt said that he sends out every letter and it starts out with the safety and all the students and staff, that's true. Because I remember I'm one of those that read the letters, and, you know, I'm one of those, and it's true. You do start the letters like that. You always have. And you always have, you know, what's best for the children and the families and the staff in our community in your heart. And I fully support you. I support everything you just said, and you have my full backing.
Thank you, Director Perez. Director Way.
Yes, thank you so much, Superintendent Utterback, for again continuing to center this conversation around the safety of our students first and foremost. I feel like again, you know, I think this pandemic is going to continue to grow before we see any flattening. I feel like health equity has been an ongoing issue for decades and generations in this country. And I frankly, you know, I know that the acts of our federal leaders have also brought us to this place where we're at now, where there isn't enough resources, quite frankly. There isn't enough support. There isn't enough testing happening. And so I am not really relying too much on, you know, our folks at the federal level to really help us here locally. And so I, you know, also feel like, you know, if even before COVID, if we had families again who didn't have health care, right, or didn't have health insurance, or couldn't go see the doctor regularly because of barriers or poverty or challenges, those things are only going to continue to get worse. And so the question that and it's not even a question for me at this point, it's just the right thing to do, is how are we going to minimize the effects of COVID and the stress and the trauma that I think, again, children coming in and out of our school, you know, going to school, coming back home. I mean, even for myself as an adult, going to the grocery store, coming back home. I'm also stressed, right? Like, oh gosh, like every day, like, am I gonna get it? Am I gonna pass it on, to my family? And so, I think these fears and concerns are very valid. And like I said, I feel like nationally and statewide, we just don't have the prevention procedures and the screening and the testing locked in place. I think our safety net is continued to be really hard hit. I mean, it was already hard hit before, clearly. And I think even more so, I think not only the virus, but we're going to continue to see a deep economic recession. So for those factors, I also am in alignment with you in that I don't think, I don't think the reopening of the schools for our children at this point, certainly in the fall, is going to really provide that confidence and safety that we need to really assure families and students that they're going to be safe. So I think a lot of other places need to be, again, put in place, particularly around the health measures, the screening, the testing, all that. And, scientifically speaking, I mean, we just need to see a significant flattening of this curve before I think we move into that next step. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Director Benaloga. Director Benaloga, I'm sorry.
Sorry, had to find my mouse. Thank you. I want to just thank the team so much for all of their work. This is an incredibly daunting task, and given the information that we've gone over tonight, there's still so much more work to be done. I appreciate the sentiment that we're not ready to open the doors, and I fully support that. I understand. I get it. We all want our kids back in those classrooms. We want our teachers we're building those relationships, and I do believe that it's so important. But I think there's so many things we don't know, and there's so many things that we don't have in place that it makes sense to take that step back. It almost feels, and I understand the guidance that schools were to look at opening. But I think we need to be prudent and we need to be careful. And so I do support that decision and appreciate, again, all of the work that you have done and all of the work that your team is going to continue to do over the summer. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Schrader.
Thank you. Superintendent Erback and staff, thank you, of course, for all the work you have done on the 3 plans to date. I'm in support of an online comprehensive plan to be the direction that we go. I had my 2 statements I was going to make to kind of illustrate the point. In March, when we sent everybody home to protect the community, the numbers are higher than they were then. And I used Post-it notes to show respect to our chair, and I like it because you can actually then rearrange things into yeah, there you go, Kathy. And so my 2 that I have are green. It says, in the very first few weeks of school, we have a cold that goes around, and we have fevers that go around, and how do we differentiate between COVID and just the standard cold? And and the bus issue, which I did address a little bit. I really feel that we would be doing the incubator, and then they would be going home to their families and parents, and then spreading it through our community, and people. This is people's lives. Not everybody's going to die, but people are going to die, and we typically make decisions based on keeping the student in the seat so they can have a life versus them dropping out, and so they can have an opportunity to save their life, to have a life. This is very different for us as board members to be looking at it as the breathing in and out being sustained. And so I hope we have a vaccine and a cure, and we get back to having classes in where they see each other. And I know it's going to be a lot of work, but saving a life is imperative. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McVeigh.
Thank you, and appreciate your words, Matt, and I know they're heartfelt. And I agree with you that we need to build the best A plan that you can, and then an equally, if not as great, B plan. What I worry about, and what you, I'm sure, worry about too, is those with the most means will have choices in this. And so many of our families live paycheck to paycheck. And in the spring, when we had to cancel classes and go to a distance learning model, many businesses were closed down. Businesses aren't closed down right now. And I don't know a lot of employers who are going to say, go ahead and stay home with your child and your job's protected. And we know the stats on homelessness, and we know the stats on people that literally have no savings. And that weighs, and I know it weighs heavily on you, so I'm preaching to the preacher here, but it's concerning to me. And school isn't daycare, but we have built a whole system around kids being in school and people have, when their jobs mirroring those hours. And so I am worried about that.
As am I.
Thank you, Director McFay. Director Bauer?
Thank you, Matt and staff, for all the work that you have done. You know, when I first saw those plans, I was thinking very positively, but as I am reading every day and everything I can about the status of this pandemic, I was becoming more and more worried too. One life, that's all it takes. I mean, loss of one life. And the unknown factors is something we don't see, but we know it's there, and we haven't been containing it. I agree with what you said, that we don't want to add to the problem. And your care and the care of your staff, you know, comes across, and I so appreciate your honesty. So thank you for all of that, and thank you, other board members, for your questions and thoughts. I agree with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bauer. And I will just end with saying, you know, Matt, you stayed with us to see us through this. And so I can't imagine the level of depth that comes with the thought in what you have said. I can hear it in every word that you care. And I know that everyone in the district cares. And this is a very difficult time for everyone. But I hope people can see that we are in a time of complete change. Change is desired, change is needed, change is happening. And it's not missing any corner of this universe. And this is another corner that it is touching. And it is very different what we are about to embark on. None of us have ever seen it before. But what I do know in the history of America and the history of life, when we have these moments, there are beautiful things on the other side. It is not an easy walk. It is not a fun walk. But as we walk it together, and with confidence, and do our due diligence and our research, as everyone is doing, we can come out on the other side stronger and better. But the first thing we have to do is consider life. I'm choosing life. And life right now looks really different than it's ever looked before. But we have to be committed to that in everything we do, everything we say, and everything we are. And so, Matt, I hope you hear it. You are not alone. We are here together. We will walk through this together. You and your team do what is best. We keep talking about it. We keep working through it. But God darn it, do the simplest thing and do it great. And if that means one way, then that's what it needs to be. And you come back to us, and as we make a decision, and we all will verbally tell you how we feel about it, we will all take the brunt of this together, because we all need to be a part of this. No one person can do this, y'all. This entire community has to be committed to choosing life. So with that being said, if there's any other questions, I will definitely open the floor for that. If not, we have definitely leaned into a lot of everyone's time, but I know everyone's committed to this time at this point, because it is very important. But does anyone have any other questions that they need to get out? Well, if seeing none, it is 8:56 and we are now adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.